Hi, I'm a father of two, in my 8th year of marriage, and I'm about to turn 40. My family lives in a large city in the Midwest, and my wife, whose name is Lisa, is 2 years younger than me. Of course, for privacy reasons, we're using fake names. I've decided to stay anonymous because this story reveals some of my more embarrassing personal issues from just a few months ago. I work as a production manager at a major corporation, a company everyone would recognize by name. My relationship with Lisa began during a local volunteer event. I was immediately drawn to her quiet, yet beautiful charm, and after 3 months of persistent pursuit, we started dating. We had 2 amazing years of a passionate and happy relationship, which eventually led to marriage. When we first got married, everyone envied me, and I truly believed that marrying Lisa was the best thing that ever happened to me. One of the reasons I decided to marry her was how well we connected physically during our dating phase, and that aspect of our relationship was really important to me. But after we had our 2 kids, things started to change bit by bit. When we had our first child, things were still okay. However, after the birth of our second child, Lisa became more and more exhausted from taking care of the kids, and our intimacy suffered. During our dating years, we used to be intimate at least 3 times a week. This continued even after our first child, but after the second was born, it dropped to maybe 2 or 3 times a month. And even then, I found myself doing most of the work, while Lisa treated it more like a chore she had to get through. This really started to take a toll on me, and we had several serious conversations about it. Lisa assured me that things would improve once the kids got older and started going to daycare, but as time went on, nothing really changed. After a few years, I, too, began to lose interest in our relationship. And to make things worse, I noticed that as I got older, I wasn't able to last as long during intimate moments. And then, something unexpected happened, almost like a cruel joke. Just as our oldest started going to kindergarten and our youngest to daycare, Lisa suddenly started showing a renewed interest in our sex life. But for me, it felt like a nightmare. That night was another example. Lisa had put the kids to bed early and gave me the signal. "Are you done already?" she asked sharply after just a few minutes. Her question caught me off guard, and I felt like I wanted to disappear into the floor. I had been holding out for 2 weeks, hoping this time would be different, but here I was, finished in just 3 minutes. I was crushed. "I'm sorry, babe," I said, as Lisa softly cuddled into me, trying to comfort me. But even her gentle words weren't enough to make me feel better. "It's okay. You've just been really tired lately," she said, trying to reassure me. But the truth was, this had been happening for almost a year now. Even though Lisa wasn't openly complaining, I knew she was probably feeling disappointed too. So, I mustered up the courage to suggest, should I see a doctor about this? No guy wants to admit there might be something wrong with him in that department, but I knew it was time to face the issue head-on. The next day, we went to the doctor and had some tests done. To my surprise, the results came back completely normal. Physically, there was nothing wrong with me. But in that moment, I realized what the real problem was. Lisa was still attractive to me, but when we were intimate, her attitude felt more like she was fulfilling a duty as a wife, rather than genuinely enjoying it. At first, I chalked it up to her being tired from raising the kids. But as time went on, the passion between us faded. The intense emotions we shared in the early stages of dating had disappeared, and I gradually lost interest in our relationship. My confidence took a hit. In an effort to get myself out of this slump, I started hitting the gym hard, focusing especially on lower body workouts. I even took up swimming to improve my stamina and endurance. Although I managed to get in better shape and boost my confidence, the lack of connection in our intimate life remained unresolved. Then, out of nowhere, a camping trip offered us a chance to change everything. While my physical health was fine, the doctor still prescribed me some medication, the kind that just about every guy in America has heard of. That night, I took the pill, full of newfound confidence, and made love to Lisa. The pill did its job, but I still couldn't shake the feeling of boredom from the same old positions and reactions. I went through the motions, making sure Lisa was satisfied, but I felt nothing. A month later, on a Friday evening, Lisa came home excited. "Do you have plans tomorrow?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, why?" She smiled brightly and said, "Let's go camping. We haven't been in forever, and I thought it'd be great to get away for a while and relax. Seeing how happy she was, I couldn't say no. It had been years since we last went camping. We had taken the kids to amusement parks, water parks, and zoos, but it had been a long time since we packed up our old camping gear. Back when we were dating, we went camping a lot, but now, all our equipment was collecting dust in the back of the garage. I agreed without hesitation. Then, Lisa added, "Oh, and we're not going alone. My friend Katie and her husband are coming, too." Hearing this made me feel unexpectedly excited. I'd met Katie a few times before. She was one of Lisa's friends from our neighborhood, a fellow mom, who had a son the same age as our oldest. Katie was 4 years younger than Lisa and had a bubbly, outgoing personality. She had a slightly fuller figure but carried it with confidence, and to be honest, she was exactly my type. Her body was curvy in all the right places, and her face was just as beautiful. I couldn't help but think how Katie seemed to have all the qualities I sometimes missed in Lisa. Whenever the two of them were together, it felt like they were competing, their different kinds of charm radiating off each other. But they were total opposites. Lisa was quiet and sweet, while Katie was bold and adventurous. Truth be told, Katie embodied everything I sometimes wished Lisa had. That night, we sent the kids off to their grandparents' house. The kids were excited they hadn't been there in a while, and their grandpa had promised to spoil them with all the snacks they wanted. The next morning, Lisa woke up early, dressed in comfortable workout clothes and loose-fitting shorts, and began packing for the trip. As we were loading everything into the car, we heard a voice call out, "Hey, Lisa." We turned around, and there was Katie. I couldn't help but do a double take. Katie was dressed casually but in a way that highlighted her figure, a snug t-shirt with a blue cardigan tied around her waist and denim shorts that showed off her long, toned legs. There wasn't an ounce of fat on them. I caught myself thinking, wow, she's gorgeous. Her husband was one lucky guy. Lisa greeted Katie warmly, and the two started chatting immediately. "Lisa, I'm coming solo today," Katie said, with a playful smile. "My husband had to leave on a last-minute business trip last night, so it's just me. Do you mind if I hitch a ride with you guys?" she asked sweetly. Lisa laughed and said, "Of course. Where'd you leave your son?" Katie smiled. "My mom's watching him for the weekend. She told me to go have fun and not worry about a thing." Her smile was so charming, it was hard not to be drawn in. As we packed the last of the gear, Katie bent over to organize the trunk. My eyes involuntarily wandered to her figure, but before I knew it, she suddenly turned around, catching me off guard. Embarrassed, I quickly averted my gaze. She playfully patted me on the shoulder and said, "Thanks for driving, big brother," before climbing into the back seat. I couldn't help but think to myself, this woman is really something. Our destination was about 75 miles outside the city, a secluded spot in the mountains with a lake that fed into a reservoir. It was remote enough that not many people knew about it, a place only locals would visit. On the way, Lisa and Katie sat in the back seat, chatting and laughing together. I thought the drive would be boring, but that quickly changed once I noticed the different view in the rearview mirror. Every time I looked up, I could see Katie's long, white legs reflected there. Since Lisa was sitting next to her in the back seat rather than up front, I felt free to sneak glances at the beautiful sight. About halfway through the trip, Lisa, having woken up early that morning, fell asleep, and soon, I could hear her soft snoring. It was just Katie and me awake in the car. Katie seemed bored, playing on her phone, while I continued to sneak peeks at her through the mirror, admiring the scene. Then, suddenly, Katie looked up at the rearview mirror, and our eyes met. I was startled, but she adjusted her posture, seemingly aware that I had been watching her. It was an incredibly awkward moment, but I tried to remain focused on driving, telling myself it was only natural to glance at the mirror while driving. A few minutes later, a car honked from behind, and I glanced back at the mirror again. This time, I saw something unexpected. Katie had her eyes closed, seemingly asleep. I assumed she had dozed off and unconsciously settled into a more relaxed position, so I boldly continued admiring her. I couldn't take my eyes off her. Katie shifted occasionally, but fortunately, the road was quiet, and I didn't have to worry about traffic. I kept stealing looks at her through the rearview mirror, captivated by her long legs and the skin peeking out from her shorts. With her head slightly tilted and her body gently moving as she shifted, it looked almost like deliberate temptation. In the stillness of the car, her soft breathing and subtle movements filled the air, and I was mesmerized. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of what was happening. She seemed to be asleep, but her posture only intensified my feelings. The quiet road allowed me to continue watching her more boldly. The tension in the car felt electric, a mix of nerves and excitement. I couldn't stop myself from watching her, even though every second felt like I was breaking some kind of unspoken rule. Luckily, the road remained empty, and I kept driving without incident, though the short drive felt like it stretched on forever. When we finally arrived at our destination, I parked the car at the base of the mountain, since we couldn't drive all the way to the secluded spot near the lake. Just as the car stopped, Katie suddenly sat up straight and asked, "Are we there?" I nodded, a little surprised, and Lisa woke up right at that moment, apologizing. "Katie, I'm so sorry. I must have dozed off since I got up so early today. Did you get some sleep?" she asked. Katie glanced at me before answering, "No, I tried to sleep but didn't manage to." In that moment, I was stunned. Katie hadn't been sleeping after all. That meant she had known the whole time that I'd been sneaking glances at her in the mirror. To make matters worse, it didn't seem like she was upset. In fact, I had the distinct feeling she had allowed me to watch, maybe even encouraged it. Could she have done it on purpose? My mind raced, and I didn't have the courage to look her in the eye. We started walking down the small path through the woods toward the lake. Lisa and Katie walked ahead of me, and I couldn't help but get lost in the view of Katie's perfect figure from behind. Every time I lifted my head, her back and legs filled my sight, making me feel as though I were stealing glances at something forbidden. The temptation to keep watching her was overwhelming, so I tried to focus on other things as we walked. About halfway to our destination, we took a break. "Honey, can you pass me some water?" "I didn't realize it would be this hot," Lisa said. I reached into my bag, pulled out a bottle, and handed one to each of them. Katie, being her usual bold self, tilted her head back and drank half the bottle in one go. Some water dripped down onto her chest, and I found myself stealing a few more glances. Katie noticed me looking and smiled mischievously. "What are you staring at? Is it because of the water?" she teased. No, I just noticed the water dripping," I stammered, embarrassed. She laughed and nodded, and I quickly looked away, trying to hide my embarrassment. I figured this would turn into an awkward situation if it went on any longer. So when we started walking again, I took the lead, trying to avoid walking behind them. I didn't have the nerve to stay behind them any longer. When we finally reached the campsite, all the exhaustion from the hike faded away, washed out by the beauty of the scene before us. The towering trees were surrounded by small wildflowers, and in the clearing was a patch of grass big enough to set up a few tents. This spot was known only to the most dedicated campers. There was a large lake nearby, but to get there, we'd need to walk through the woods. It wasn't the right time to visit, though, since the best part about the lake was that after nightfall, the area around it filled with fireflies, glowing in the moonlight like something out of a fairy tale. We decided to set up camp first and visit the lake later in the evening. "Honey, I'll leave the tent set up to you," Lisa said. "Katie, what should we have for dinner? How about barbecue? I brought some beer too, so we can have a fun night." Katie answered with a big smile. "Sounds perfect. Let's have a great time tonight," Lisa agreed, smiling back. I started setting up the tents while Lisa and Katie got dinner ready. With some cold beer and delicious barbecue, it felt like all of our worries would melt away. By the time everything was ready, the sun had set and the sky was growing dark. Katie suggested we go to the lake, and we all eagerly agreed. As we walked through the woods, it truly felt like a magical place. The moonlight reflected off the water, and the breeze rippled through the trees like waves in the ocean. Fireflies filled the air, and it felt like we had stepped into a dream. "Honey, this place is gorgeous. Let's come here more often," Lisa said, holding my hand and resting her head on my shoulder. "Yeah, who would have thought a place like this existed? It's too beautiful to capture with a phone or camera. It's the perfect spot for couples," I said, equally amazed. Katie walked alongside us, marveling at the scene. "I can't believe a place like this actually exists. It's like a dream," she said. We spent a long time by the lake, just soaking it all in, before heading back to camp to prepare for dinner. After a busy day, we were all starving. When the barbecue was finally ready, we gathered on the grass. Katie grabbed some beers from the cooler and handed one to each of us. There was nothing better than enjoying cold beer and barbecue in such a beautiful setting. "Let's have a toast," Katie said, raising her can. The three of us clinked our cans and started drinking. I'm not much of a drinker, and I usually max out at about 3 beers. But seeing how happy they both were, I joined in. A little while later, Katie kept encouraging me to drink more, playfully holding up her can. I gave Lisa a hesitant look, but she just smiled and urged me to keep drinking. By the time I finished my 3rd beer, their conversation started to blur. Lisa knew I couldn't hold my alcohol, so she came over and said, "Honey, you should stop drinking and get some rest. How about lying down in the tent for a bit?" Katie laughed and added, "What? Already? You've only had a few cans." I smiled awkwardly, trying not to kill the mood, but I had to admit that I was the first to get tired. With Lisa's help, I made my way to the tent and passed out almost instantly. I'm not sure how long I slept, but I woke up feeling unbearably hot. Half asleep, I stripped off my clothes, cooling down a bit, and quickly fell back asleep. In the middle of the night, I woke up as the alcohol started to wear off, and my body felt cold. Lisa was lying next to me, facing away. All day, something had been bothering me, an unfulfilled urge I couldn't seem to shake. As I lay there, the events of the day came rushing back, especially the thrill I felt from being in this outdoor setting with Lisa's attractive friend in the tent right next to ours. It had been a long time since I felt such excitement. Suddenly, my emotions surged beyond my control, but something seemed off. Since when has Lisa been so forward? I thought. I had always been the one to initiate. Was it this environment? I couldn't hold back any longer and began to act more assertively. But as I reached for the button of her shorts, something felt strange. These were jeans. I distinctly remembered her wearing loose shorts earlier that morning. Still, her enthusiastic response left me with no room to think, and under the lingering influence of the alcohol, I was completely drawn into the seductive moment. The next morning, I woke up alone in the tent. As my mind cleared, I began recalling the strange details from the night before. Did that really happen with Lisa's friend? It felt like a dream. Then I heard Lisa's voice outside the tent. "Honey, wake up. Let's go swimming." As soon as I stepped out of the tent, the thoughts of last night vanished. The scene before me was too breathtaking to think of anything else. Lisa was wearing a light blue string bikini that was incredibly alluring, and right beside her was Katie, equally captivating. Katie's figure was so voluptuous that her swimsuit looked like it was about to burst. It was truly beautiful. A little later, I wanted to confirm what had happened the night before. I looked at Lisa and asked, "Honey, where were you last night?" Lisa gave me a sheepish smile and said, "I slept in Katie's tent. Sorry for leaving you alone." In that moment, I was stunned. Had what I felt last night really happened, or had it all been a dream? Lisa's answer only deepened my confusion. I glanced at Katie, but her face was expressionless, as if nothing had happened between us. But if it wasn't her, then who? There were only the 3 of us here. We arrived at the lake, and both women dove in. They kept themselves in great shape by working out together, and swimming was second nature to them. They splashed around, playing in the water, while I sat on the shore, watching them. Lisa looked at me and called out, "Why are you just sitting there? Come join us. The water feels amazing." So I finally dove in for a swim. The clean, pristine water was refreshingly cool and invigorating. A short time later, Lisa suddenly screamed. I turned around quickly to see her struggling in the water. Katie and I reacted immediately, swimming toward her. Only when Lisa grabbed onto my neck was she able to regain her balance. "Honey, are you okay? What happened?" I asked, my voice full of concern. Lisa replied, "I got a cramp in my leg. Getting a cramp while swimming is dangerous, so I quickly helped her to the shore and massaged her leg. Katie assisted, too. After some time, Lisa said, "You two go ahead and swim without me." I don't think I can go back in. I'm scared it'll cramp up again. I was about to suggest we all head back, but Katie protested. What? I still want to have fun. It took so much effort to get out here. It'd be no fun to swim alone. Lisa, not wanting to spoil the mood, gently pushed me away and said, "Go ahead. The two of you swim a couple more laps. I'll join you when my leg feels better." Then she looked at me and said, "Honey, Katie's an amazing swimmer. Why don't you race her?" Before I could respond, Katie chimed in, "Yeah, let's race, big brother. Let's see who's faster." With no other choice, I agreed to a swimming race with her. We reached the shore at almost the same time, but before I could say anything, Katie slipped on the wet ground and fell forward. Instinctively, I grabbed her arm, while my other hand caught her waist. But in my effort, she twisted, causing both of us to fall into the water together. The suddenness of the situation startled me, but Katie reacted by clinging to my neck, her body pressed tightly against mine. As her soft body rested in my arms, I froze, unsure of what to do. We were so close that I could feel her breath. Katie's water-soaked form was mesmerizing, her curvy figure smooth and sensual. I was completely dazed for a moment. Then, I couldn't hold back any longer. "Last night, was that you?" I asked. Katie didn't answer. Her breathing only grew heavier. I took her hand and led her to the grassy shore. I could no longer resist her, and I kissed her. She didn't pull away. Instead, she returned the kiss. Almost unconsciously, my hand began to untie her swimsuit string. But she stopped me, saying, "Wait, Lisa's waiting for us. If we take too long, won't she get suspicious?" Her words jolted me back to reality. If we continued, my relationship with Lisa could be in real danger. Slowly, I regained my composure and let her go. Katie, her face flushed, stood up and turned around, tying her swimsuit back in place. She glanced at me one last time before diving back into the water and swimming to the other side of the lake. I hesitated for a moment, then followed her back to where Lisa was waiting. Lisa smiled at me and asked, "So, how was it? Katie's an amazing swimmer, isn't she? You couldn't even beat her." Still red-faced, I shot a quick glance at Katie and then smiled at Lisa. "Yeah, Katie's swimming skills are seriously impressive." Afterward, I lay down on the grass to rest while they continued their conversation without paying much attention to me. My mind was in turmoil, and the guilt inside me kept growing. Back at camp, we started preparing dinner. Katie and Lisa, still in their swimsuits, moved around the campsite, and I couldn't help but glance at Katie. Occasionally, she'd catch me looking and would blush before quickly looking away. Everything felt like a dream. As night fell, I realized it was the last night of our camping trip. While we were drinking, Katie stepped away for a moment, and Lisa leaned in to whisper in my ear, "Honey, I won't leave you alone tonight." Her face was slightly flushed, and I knew exactly what she meant. But as memories of the night before and that afternoon surfaced, the guilt inside me grew even stronger. Ironically, that guilt only made my desire burn hotter. I couldn't stop asking myself, why am I acting like this? Is there something wrong with me? While drinking, I made sure not to have too much because I wanted to be fully present with Lisa later. After we returned to our tent, I was eager to be close to her, but at first, she resisted, saying that Katie might still be awake. However, the feelings I had suppressed all day were now too strong to ignore, and eventually, Lisa gave in. That night, Lisa was unusually enthusiastic, doing things she normally wouldn't, making sure I was satisfied. Strangely, I found myself regaining a sense of male pride that I hadn't felt in a long time. And the ironic thing was, it all stemmed from the guilt of my infidelity. The shame of what I had done with her friend, combined with the fact that Katie was just a few feet away, had only fueled my desire. Even Lisa couldn't hold back and shyly admitted, "This feels different from before, doesn't it?" The next day, we packed up and got ready to head back home after our camping trip. As Katie stepped out of the tent, it was clear she hadn't slept well. Lisa, with a concerned voice, asked, "Katie, what's wrong? Didn't you sleep well last night?" Katie shot us a sharp look and replied, "How could I sleep with all that noise last night?" Lisa and I both blushed at the same time, and she pinched my waist, scolding me. It was obvious that she was upset about me ignoring her warning last night. I couldn't help but notice that Lisa looked even more beautiful today. As we packed up the camping gear and prepared to go home, I felt like the whole trip had been a dream. Even though we live in the same complex, we're all so busy with our lives that we hardly get to meet. I felt a pang of regret, wondering when we'd all be able to get together again. But after this camping trip, I was a completely changed man. And Lisa had changed too. I felt like a true man again, and Lisa, inspired by something, became much more proactive in our relationship. I knew this change had been influenced by her friend. Despite the shocking events of that night, I still loved my wife deeply, so I decided to bury that incident deep inside me and move on. However, it wasn't as simple as I thought. A few weeks later, as I was about to take the subway to work, I realized I had left some important papers at home. I rushed back, unlocked the door, and walked in, only to find something completely unexpected. Lisa wasn't in the living room, so I assumed she was in the bedroom. As I walked towards the bedroom, I heard her talking to someone in the bathroom. Curious, I pressed my ear to the door to listen. "Katie, my husband has been amazing lately. The method you taught me really worked. I felt something I hadn't felt in over a year. I don't know what I would have done without you." Then I heard Katie's voice. "Let's just leave it at that. If your husband finds out this was all part of our plan, he might leave you. But honestly, I'm surprised he hasn't come to me." Lisa chuckled and replied, "What? Once wasn't enough for you? You've been lonely since your divorce, huh? I haven't told him about your divorce yet, by the way. And don't even think about trying to win him over. I won't tell him anything, though. Anyway, I've got to go." I stood there, completely stunned. A plan? That meant Lisa knew about what had happened between Katie and me, and she had orchestrated it. My head spun with questions. I fought the urge to confront her immediately, grabbed my papers, and quietly left the house. That day at work, I couldn't focus at all. My mind kept replaying the events from the camping trip and the conversation I'd overheard between Lisa and Katie. After work, I sat in my car for a long time, trying to make sense of everything, and finally decided to go to Katie's apartment. I had never been to her place before, but I knew her apartment number since we lived in the same complex. When I rang the bell, Katie answered the door, looking surprised to see me. She was wearing tight yoga clothes, her skin glistening with a slight sheen of sweat, as if she had just finished working out. On any other day, I might have been distracted by how tempting she looked, but today, I wasn't in the mood. "Katie, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice flustered. I answered coldly, "Can I come in? We need to talk." Sensing that something was off, she let me inside. We sat down, and she couldn't hide her anxious expression. "What's this about?" she asked. I got straight to the point. "What did you and my wife plan behind my back? Tell me." She looked startled. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, trying to act clueless, but I wasn't buying it. "I overheard your conversation with my wife today," I said firmly. Katie's face went pale, and she was at a loss for words. After a moment of silence, I couldn't hold back anymore. I stood up and moved closer to her. "What are you talking about?" Katie asked, her voice trembling as she backed up against the wall. Cornered, she had nowhere to go. I pushed her against the wall and said, "Tell me what happened, or I won't let this go." She looked at me for a second, then turned her head away and said, "Why are you asking me? You should ask your wife. If anyone's a victim here, it's me. Why are you blaming me?" At that moment, I couldn't contain my anger any longer and raised my hand to hit her. Katie flinched, her eyes shut tightly in fear, but I couldn't go through with it. My hand froze in midair. I hesitated, and she opened her eyes to look at me. "Were you really going to hit me? Get out!" she shouted, her voice trembling as tears welled up in her eyes. She started pushing me away, but I couldn't leave without getting answers. I don't know where I found the courage, but I grabbed her arm, pulled her into my arms, and held her tight. She struggled to break free, but I didn't let go. "What are you doing?" she cried, still fighting me. She kept resisting, but in that moment, her tears touched my hand, and my resolve began to weaken. Seeing her tear-streaked face, I finally let her go. She pulled away from me, saying, "Just leave." Don't stay here any longer." Her voice was cold, but it hurt me to hear it. "Katie, I'm sorry. I acted impulsively today. I'll apologize properly," I said, feeling regretful as I turned to leave. Just then, she spoke softly. "You said you wanted the truth, right? I'll tell you everything." I looked at her, waiting. She explained that the day I went to the hospital for a checkup, Lisa had called her. Katie noticed right away that something was bothering Lisa, and eventually, Lisa opened up about our marital problems. She told Katie how difficult things had become between us over the past year, and Katie quickly realized that the core issue was a lack of passion. Katie had been inspired by a story she'd seen on YouTube recently and shared it with Lisa. The video was about two couples whose relationships were on the verge of collapse. They ended up living together in the same house for a while, during which they had affairs with each other's partners. Instead of leading to divorce, the experience gave the couples a new appreciation for each other. Lisa, who usually wavered on most things, took this situation seriously and came up with a plan to solve our problems. They decided to execute this plan during the camping trip, and the result had exceeded their expectations. Katie looked at me and continued, "Your wife loves you deeply. She accepted your affair, but she didn't want to lose you. She just knew this method might be hard for you to accept. Now that you know the truth, please don't disappoint her. And please keep today's visit a secret. If you don't, she'll be hurt." As I left Katie's apartment, my mind was in turmoil. Just then, my phone rang. It was Lisa. "Honey, when are you coming home? I've prepared dinner." "I'm just waiting for you," she said, her voice soft and sweet. Hearing her made me feel a little more at ease. I realized how much I truly loved her and that I couldn't live without her. I decided to act as if none of this had ever happened. "Honey, I'm on my way. I'll be there soon." "Okay, I'll be waiting." When I got home, I gathered my thoughts before opening the door. Lisa greeted me with a big smile and wrapped her arms around me. "Honey, you've worked so hard today. I'm so glad you're home." I stroked her hair and went to the table, where I tasted the meal she had prepared. After dinner, we cleaned up and got ready for bed. That's when it hit me, if I hadn't saved a nation in my previous life, there's no way God would have given me a wife like this. My wife is more than just a partner. She's like an angel, the source of all my happiness. Every day with her feels like a blessing. Who else could have a wife like this? Every morning, she greets me with a bright smile. Whether she's doing chores or taking care of the kids, she's always full of love. Whenever I'm struggling, she's there, holding my hand and offering comforting words of encouragement. She's a special gift given only to me. Every time we're together, I'm moved by her warm heart and thoughtful nature. I love her deeply, and she loves me just as much. We're the perfect partners, providing each other with endless comfort. Every moment with her is precious, and together, we're building a story that's uniquely ours. Every day, I'm thankful to God for blessing me with this incredible wife. Life with her is invaluable, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Just being with her makes me feel like the happiest man in the world. That's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and turn on notifications. More stories are on the way. Thank you for watching.